Hope you brought your magnifying glass. We're going to try to find Elixir's secret ingredient today. All right, so first, a quick introduction. My name is Owen Bickford. I'm not reading that from the slide. I am a person. I'm employed by SmartLogic. Got a SmartLogic crowd back here in the back. Hit up by Yair and Bree if you're interested in what we do. I'm a co-host of the Elixir Wizards podcast, and I'm currently based in Dallas, Texas. Stars at night are big and bright, and of course they've all melted. I'm currently the maintainer of web authoring components, which is passkeys for live view apps. It's in beta, so probably don't put it in production yet. But just this past week, I released an update to generate schemas and context for your user key, and user token, trying to make it easy to add passkeys to live view applications. And if I were to be a Barbie model, I think I would be Bald Allen. All right, so I figured my entry point for this talk would be kind of talking about, if we're looking for the secret ingredient, let's cover the known ingredients, right? The not-so-secret stuff. So some of this kind of is inspired from the marketing page of elixirlang.org. So Elixir 101, right? So Elixir scales because our code runs in processes which are isolated, and they share information through message passing. And those processes scale not only within a machine, so we can take advantage of all the cores in a CPU. We can also take advantage of cores on other machines in our connected network. And thanks to a lot of work done over the past few years with NX, or numerical Elixir, our processes can also run on GPU cores. So we can take advantage of those cores, which are really good at numerical computation and very efficient. And you get thousands of cores on a GPU compared to maybe a few dozen on your laptop. So if you're new to Elixir, the way this works is we got two processes here. They each need to do some stuff. And in order to communicate with each other, they send messages back and forth. And before we get too far, I guess I'll do a little bit of a crowd participation here. All right, so I'm going to ask yes or no questions. And if you want to answer yes, you'll clap once. If you want to answer no, you'll clap 0 times. All right? Does everyone understand? All right, works every time. All right, so who here would say you're in the beginner camp of Elixir? Awesome. All right, who here would say you're kind of intermediate? Whatever that means. And then who here would say you're advanced? Maybe you're at the lowest levels. Rudy, gotcha. All right. So just to kind of like help me guide the talk a little bit. Cool, so that's processes at the high level. And in code terms, what this means is we can write, just as an example here, I've got a tickets module which uses the gen server behavior. And kind of hand-waving a lot of stuff you'll do in a gen server, but whenever this gen server receives a message called, the message would be get next ticket, it's an atom, it will do some stuff and return new state and manage its internal state. And if you want to know more about state and Elixir, definitely check out Isaac Yamamoto's talk from earlier today about that once it's online. And then whenever you want to call that API, that tickets module or the process, let's say you're doing this from a live view, maybe the user is hitting a button and the event is get next ticket. All we have to do is call that process, which will return the new state, and we'll get our new ticket and do some stuff with that. All right, so Elixir, with Elixir and the virtual machine that we run on, we also get fault tolerance because these processes are typically managed by a supervisor. They don't have to be, but typically when you're starting a new application, you're going to start it with a supervisor. And you may have multiple supervisors if your application's a little bit more advanced. But a supervisor is essentially just a process that monitors other processes and is configured to do that. There's a special kind of supervisor behavior, if I remember correctly. And whenever a process crashes underneath the supervisor, it can restart that process and or its siblings, depending on how you configure it. So the process is restarted with its initial state, so it may be doing a database call or kind of resetting up its state if it needs to restart. And the supervisor determines whether any of the siblings are restarted at the same time. So here we've got our supervisor at the top, and we're going to have a couple of processes underneath the supervisor. And if process 1 dies, then supervisor gets cranky, restarts the process. Process B there was unaffected because this particular supervisor was configured to be 1 for 1, meaning one process goes down and it doesn't affect any other processes. That's kind of high level of kind of the fault tolerance that we get with Elixir and the Beam. And in code terms, what this looks like is typically in your application module, you'll see application.ex somewhere in your application, and you'll see this type of code. You'll see a list of children. These are different modules or processes in your application that need to be started whenever the whole application starts. And those are started and monitored by the supervisor. And then the strategy there at the end is one of a few options. This is the most common, I think, just letting a process die without affecting other processes. All right, so that's kind of running the code. Let's talk about writing the code. So I'm happy to report we are in functional programming land. So our data is immutable, and our functions are first-class citizens. And whenever I was learning about all this stuff a few years ago, that was kind of a hard concept to wrap my mind around. But all this means is you can pass functions to other functions. And if that sounds like circular kind of thinking, maybe it is, but some examples here would be, well, first of all, so these functions can have side effects. So some examples of a function with a side effect would be updating information in a database or a cache, updating files, even interacting with hardware, turning lights and switches on and off. Those would be side effects. All can be done through our functional programming language. And functions can pattern match on argument values. So just to kind of illustrate immutability here, we've got these two functions, and they operate on cupcakes. So whenever function A needs to call function B, it clones the cupcake, or the piece of data, and sends that over to function B, so that if function B is chomping away at the cupcake, function A still is able to operate on its copy of the cupcake. And in code terms, this is kind of what it looks like. So here I've got a kind of a made-up function called eat cupcake. This is just going to be an OK error response. So if we get a cupcake and its carbs are over 60, then maybe we shouldn't be eating that cupcake. We're going to return an error. That's too many carbs. Otherwise, we're going to return OK. So that's just a very brief illustration of pattern matching. Also, some nice features we get with Elixir is it's been designed from the day one to be extensible, and that allows developers outside of the core team to actually build new features without having to update Elixir itself. Some of this comes through macros, so we can write code that generates other code. That would be macros. Typically, if you're working on a project, or from my experience, the macros I tend to see are kind of abstracting away some boilerplate. But if you're writing a library, you're doing something a little bit more complex than that. You can also create domain-specific languages. A couple examples would be Ecto Query and Phoenix Component. You'll see a little bit of code here in a second for the component example. And then we can pass around functions as arguments, like I said a couple of seconds ago. So the Elixir enum module is a great example of, we got several functions that can receive a function as one of the arguments, so that you have your collection, maybe some arguments, and then functions that can operate on each item in the collection. I think that's another great way of providing extensibility in the language. So to illustrate an example of the macros, so these are some macros that are coming from Phoenix Component. The first one here is embed templates. You'll notice that the parentheses are optional. But what this is doing is it's telling my component that all my template files are in a different directory, in this desserts subdirectory. And I'm going to keep this module is going to be kind of clean. It's just going to list the attributes and names of my components. So I've got a couple attributes here, one for color, one for icing. I've got the arguments that are provided by that attribute macro. And then I define the name of the component and pass it the assigns. All the template stuff lives in a separate folder. But the macros here are embed templates and attr, or attribute. All right. So writing code is only part of the job. We also need to have some tools to work with our applications even while they're running. So we're very fortunate that we got some first-class or world-class tooling, in my opinion. So first couple tools we'll talk about in this talk will be Mix. So Mix is actually used to run tasks on your project and also on your system. So we'll see some examples of that here in a second. You get several Mix tasks out of the box with Elixir. And anytime you install a new package, there's a chance that it's going to install or introduce new Mix tasks that you can use from that project as well. WebAuthn components, for example. And then Mix tasks can be run not only in the terminal in your shell. You can run these tasks in your code as well. So you can write a script that calls Mix task run, or runs a task maybe defined in a module somewhere in your code base. That's pretty handy. Say you want to scaffold your projects to be a little bit more consistent, install some dependencies. You can set up a task at your organization that maybe does like an init and kind of adds dependencies, adds some deployment files, and so on. And then we have Hex, which if you're coming from another programming language, Hex is our package manager. So Mix is for running tasks. Hex is for managing your packages. So Hex archives can be installed locally. The example you might be thinking of would be Phoenix installer. So when you run phoenix.new, that's because you've installed that archive from Hex. And so these commands do a couple things for us. They allow project developers to find and support project maintainers. And then they allow package maintainers to deploy and manage releases. So what are some things you can do with Mix? Well, if you're not sure what you've got on your machine, you can just run Mix help from anywhere, and you'll see a list of tasks that you can run from Elixir. And then once you're inside of a project directory, like an Elixir app, you can run Mix help, and you'll see more commands because you'll have dependencies that have been installed there, and you can interact with the dependencies in that particular project. And then if you need to get more information about any of these tasks that you see, you can run Mix help and then add the name of the task, and you'll see the full documentation, which would essentially be what's in the module docs for that task. So that's super handy. And then what can you do with Hex? There's a few things here. So if you're just managing a project, some of these that would be helpful to you would be Hex audit and maybe Hex docs and Hex info. So Hex info is great. If you don't want to open the browser, you just want to see what's the latest version of WebAuthn components, for example, you can do mix hex.info WebAuthn_components, and it will tell you the latest version, and you can go add that to your Mix dependencies. And then if you're a package maintainer, Hex build, Hex deploy. I don't know. I don't have those committed to memory, but you'll see a long list of Hex commands you can run as well. All right. Now, also when it comes to running our code, we have some interactive tools that are extremely helpful. I come from a couple of other languages. Before I got to do Elixir full time, I did a couple of years hard time writing and running PHP. And while it has a REPL, for the life of me and the life of my team, I could not find a way to actually run our application code. In hindsight, I think I would have to require and import a bunch of files. It's not a compiled language, so you can imagine how much fun that would be. But whenever you run IEX, you can tell it to start up your application so you can actually interact with your application while it's running. So that's helpful for just querying the database if you want to see what the data looks like when it's coming back through maybe a schema, or if you want to kind of get some documentation about functions either in your project or in maybe some dependencies. You can do that through IEX as well. You can connect to nodes. There's a whole bunch of other stuff. Check out the IEX module docs for that. We can run not only Elixir code, we can run Erlang code as well. And you can connect to external nodes. And then another tool that I think I'd like to kind of add to this list would be Livebook. So, the Elixir landing page talks a lot about IEX, but I think Livebook is really becoming kind of a first-class citizen here as well. Not only for writing interactive documentation, but I think even for writing tools that you can hand off to your teammates and maybe even to your clients who have some technical chops, but maybe don't want to be jumping into IEX directly. So you can kind of give them a little bit of a kind of, what do you call it, bumpers, like if you're going bowling, you keep the ball from going in the gutter. So a live book can help you kind of give a little bit of power to your teammates and to your clients as well. So what are some things you can do within IEX? If you just run IEX without starting any project, these are some of the things you can do. So H and then a module name or a function name would print the documentation for the module or the function you're referring to. I will kind of print some information about the data type. I'll let you read these things whenever you run IEX. And then, of course, if you're running Phoenix, then you're going to run IEX mix Phoenix server. And that will do a bunch of things for you. It starts your application and then allows you to interact with the application while it's running. You can restart your application, recompile, do a bunch of stuff from IEX. And then we're also fortunate to be able to use everything that's been built into Erlang as well. So we can call all of our Erlang code directly from Elixir without having to create separate files. And we get all the Erlang and OTP modules bundled in, so we get to access GenServer and ETS directly, and then crypto. There's many other modules. I think a few months ago I was working with zip files, and I was pleasantly, I think, surprised to find that there was a zip module in Erlang, so I didn't have to install any dependencies. I was able to unzip and update contents of a zip file just using Erlang. And the way you do that, if you're new to this, is you would add so if you find, let's say we go to the zip docs on Erlang, if you want to use that module, you'll do :zip dot whatever the function name is. And then, you can also use Erlang packages inside of your Elixir applications. So just a few examples here. Aside from zip, we've got a crypto module, so you'll see some libraries will use the hash function for hashing data. I use strong random bytes quite a bit to generate random data, especially within the WebAuthn components. So that's how I generate tokens and secrets that are passed between the browser and the client, or the browser and the server. And also, I'm a fan of ETS, so Erlang term storage. So ets.new. If I wanted to create a cupcake cache, that's maybe how it would look. So it'd be a bag of cupcakes. It'd be protected so that only the process that owns that table would be able to update the contents, but any other process could read the contents. And then if you wanted to create a zip file of cupcakes, that's kind of what you would do right there. All right, so that's the code, and let's take a quick detour. So when I was a young lad, maybe about 4 years ago, getting introduced to Elixir for the first time, I was kind of coming from JavaScript after kind of working through kind of fundamentals of programming and that kind of thing. And the way I learned most of what I knew about Elixir getting started was from video content, so YouTube. And these are just a handful of clips from last year's conference. I don't know how long it takes to get these videos from the conference into YouTube, but here within a few weeks I think we'll see our talks on YouTube as well. But we've got years now of, 9 or 10 years worth of talks you can watch, and a lot of these talks hold up really well because the core components within Elixir and Erlang don't change much. So these talks are still helpful today. And there's a whole range of talks, some of them high level, like the one today, and some of them very low level, which we'll get into more details about, kind of operations and doing things with Elixir. So I like to I still like to watch YouTube videos whenever I'm trying to learn a new concept. So if I'm taking the week off to learn about machine learning and AI, maybe I'll start on YouTube before I try to go reading some literature. And I've also learned so much by listening to probably days and days worth of podcasts over the years. So fast forward a little bit, I've been co-host of the Elixir Wizards podcast for a couple of seasons now. And I'm really proud of what we've done with this podcast. Just season 10, this is the episodes we had. So we got to speak with a lot of folks in the community about things they're doing and things they would like to see in the future with Elixir. We were kind of recapping the past 10 years and looking a little bit to the next 10 years. So if you want to find these episodes, the link's there at the bottom. And while I'm here, I'll say that we're actually looking for guests for season 11. So if you would like to nominate yourself as a guest or nominate someone else, let me know, or let any of my Smart Logic folks know, and we'll get you the details on that. But the podcasts are great. I come from a customer service background, so before I was writing code full-time, I was answering phone calls and helping people restart their modems and switch the input on the TV so they could watch TV again, that kind of thing. That's the type of work you do when you're in customer service. And whenever I wasn't actively talking on the phone, I'd be listening to podcasts. And a lot of the podcasts I listened to were based on Elixir, and I think that's how I learned to kind of interact with other developers. So if you're kind of getting started here, even if you're new to programming, I think this is a great way to get into it. And then kind of leveling up from videos to podcasts to written documentation. I think the kind of highest level of engagement I've had has been conferences. So see a lot of head nodding. This is my third ElixirConf, and maybe it's like my 6th conference total now. So 2021 was my first ElixirConf, and then within the span of a year, I got to go to 4 conferences and spoke at a couple. Spoke about a side project called Live Showy, and then introduced WebAuthn components last year at ElixirConf. So that was a lot of fun. Just preparing the talks is, it's a little bit intense, but it's very rewarding just being able to finish something and also present and get feedback from the community. And we also made last year's ElixirConf our company meetup at Smart Logic. So it was nice to finally get to meet a lot of my coworkers in person for the first time, and we had a lot of fun there in Denver. And if you are interested, ask me about Meow Wolf later. All right, so that was a detour. I don't know if you remember, but we're trying to find Elixir secret ingredient. I think there might be something else here that we talked about, running the code, writing the code, interacting with the code. And let's see here. What could it be?
Most of my time is actually spent on the ecosystem itself rather than Elixir. And I work at Dashbit, where we do our best to continue to help companies adopt Elixir and continue investing in the community.
Last year we got like most loved web framework or something, which is amazing. Yeah, I didn't even know the survey. Like I had forgotten, have a kid now. Like it was like, oh, the Stack Overflow surveys, I think. So people were claiming that like the Elixir community gamed it or something. It's like I didn't even know what was going on. So that was really cool. Hopefully we get some good numbers.
All right, so these are a couple of clips from our last season of Elixir Wizards. So if you thought this was interesting and you didn't hear the whole episode, they're free, they're available. Just go to your podcast app and find Elixir Wizards, and great episodes. So we've got a couple more clips, but what I love about these first 2 is the focus on the community. Jose's talking about, he's always adding features, he's always reviewing and writing, PRs and everything. A lot of spinning plates, but also kind of prioritizing community, helping out clients who would like to use Elixir, helping kind of answer their questions and get them into the ecosystem. And then also the feedback that we give is actually received by our maintainers, right? So like we upvote Elixir and Phoenix and Stack Overflow survey, and look, they actually get to see it, and that makes them feel good. So I think that's cool.
I think that one of the things that I love about the Elixir community is it is a very supportive place for people to make contributions. And I know a lot of people, especially folks who are earlier in their careers, will be their first contributions to open source by updating the Phoenix documentation.
The volume and the nuance of the bug reports that we started getting on the Bandit project once we had Phoenix support was just leaps and bounds larger. It really does help these projects to have users, and to have people that report bugs back. We've gotten some really deeply obscure bugs that were not things that, from a development perspective, I ever would have done.
All right, so these quotes are great because I think we all know, contributions, the first thing you think about is going to be documentation. Documentation is a great place to start if you've never contributed to open source. And then also helping so sometimes whenever you're managing a package and someone reports an issue, you're not sure, is this legit? Is it user error? Is it, do I actually have a bug in my system? And you need help kind of reproducing the error. So that's what Matt is talking about here. You release something, someone reports a problem, and then other people jump in and start to kind of say, yes, this is actually happening to me too, so you know it's not just, a one-off error. So now I can finally reveal Elixir's secret ingredient, which would be us. It's us. It's you. It's me. Yes, this is the most woo talk I'll probably ever do. So yeah, round of applause. You're the secret ingredient. All right, so let's talk about contributions. So first of all, if you're new to the community, welcome, and grab a broom. It's a nice place, but there's always something to be cleaned up, right? So these are just some places you might start. So here we've got the Elixir repo in GitHub. We've got a few entry points that I would recommend starting with. So you can jump to the contributing section, which will give you kind of a nice. It sets the expectations of what the maintainers expect from you and what you can expect from them. We've got a healthy log of issues, and they're actually nicely labeled. So if you're looking for something as a first contribution, maybe look for something that's marked easy or good for beginners. You'll see labels on those issues. We've got a great document for code of conduct, so how you should actually interact with other people in the community, so we can keep it a healthy place and keep it growing and not shrinking. And of course, security should never be an afterthought, so we've got a brief but informative document here for reporting security vulnerabilities. So check out these docs if you're looking for places to get started. And if you do want to contribute, you're actually not alone. We've got over 1,000 contributors on both Elixir Core and Phoenix. Phoenix Core, I guess I would say. So, and that's just recent. So the Phoenix framework, I believe, crossed 1,000 contributors just maybe last year. So these are both growing in terms of people contributing and also with just the volume of contributions from this growing list of folks. All right, so again, time for audience participation. I'm going to ask you a few questions. Does anyone remember how to answer? All right, still awake. All right. Now, I can't scroll through my lists, which is not helpful, so let's see what I remember. All right, so let's see. Has anyone here ever contributed to an open source project? Cool. Has anyone ever wanted to but been a little bit too scared? All right, thank you for your honesty. And then, has anyone ever released a package or open source project within Elixir or otherwise? Cool. All right, so I don't remember any other questions. Let's skip to the next slide. So here's some ideas. And I've been asking maintainers and contributors around the ecosystem over the past couple of days, like, what would you like people to actually do if they're not sure where to start? So we've already talked about some of these. And these are some questions that I also like to keep on my mind when I'm working through problems myself, as I'm using packages and whenever I'm pairing and huddling with other folks on my team. They might even find it annoying when I say open a PR, but here we go. If you're having some trouble with the package, can you improve the documentation? Can you find a bug in the issue tracker that needs to be reproduced? And can you print out some detailed information, maybe the logs or like steps of how you reproduce that? Some people who open an issue just need a little bit of help. It could be that they need some experience, or maybe they just misunderstand what needs to be done. So sometimes it's just a conversation, sometimes it's actually kind of helping reproduce the issue. Sometimes you'll find typos or just kind of incomplete information in the documentation, so you can kind of fix or clarify those docs. And then also, if you're having pain, maybe there's a function that you think could be a little bit more extensible, or a little bit, maybe it needs to be refactored in some way. This is where you probably want to reach out to the maintainers first, but you could also eventually open a PR and make some improvements to the actual code and make it easier for people who come along after you to use the same thing. So here I will pause. I think I've got good time. So Does anyone else have an idea you'd like to share for maybe contributing, kind of high-level ideas for contributing to open source? I may have listed them all. I don't know. Go ahead. Adding a live book. That's a good one, actually, yes. Live book's good. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Someone brought up YouTube training.
YouTube training, yes.
So I know a lot of
Okay, so the idea here is adding more content on YouTube. YouTube, I love YouTube. Well, let me back up. I wouldn't say I love YouTube, the platform anymore, but like the content that's on YouTube, I love because that's how I got here essentially. So I would second that as well. And kind of building on the live book idea, we're starting to see more graphs and charts in our documentation because I think Hex now has Mermaid. So that can be very helpful, especially for complex modules and functions where it's not like where there's maybe a sequence of actions and events that happen, or maybe several processes that you need to be illustrated. If you're familiar with Mermaid and you know how to build those charts, that could be helpful as well. A chart is worth a million words, right? All right, so my call to action for you today is to get out there and contribute, not only for yourself and for me, but for everyone else here at the conference, everyone who's been to the conference before, everyone who might come to the next conference, everyone who might hear about Elixir and want to jump in. So let's contribute, let's keep this community healthy, and to quote Jose, thank you.